Welcome to Practicing Mindfulness. We're going to start in a few minutes. Today we're going to be talking a little bit more about gratitude from a different perspective of coming out of Thanksgiving. Still have a few minutes here. Practicing Mindfulness. Those of you who joined us in the last few minutes started the broadcast a little bit early because of the technical issues, but we're here, we're live, talking about gratitude. Again, coming out of Thanksgiving, we had a pre-Thanksgiving gratitude session. Now we're going to talk about it. Thanksgiving in the rearview mirror. That was the so-called, it is above our wedding nigun, except that it's fascinating that it's actually used in two different tempos. In Italian, we say tempi. It's actually used in two different tempi, depending on the time of the wedding or where in the wedding it's being used. So, for the Bedekin, it's actually the slow one I was just playing, that's the Bedekin, when the bride is veiled. And then there's the sort of coming away from the chuppah, and then it speeds up almost double. So you can see how the energy and the mood just completely shift just because we're picking up the tempo by about 3 or 4 times. So the bub over wedding nigun, it has a lot of malleability. So you just heard that. Then there's this amazing connection with Purim, which isn't of course coming out until March, but the bub over have another nigun called Misha Nichnas Adar. Misha Nichnas Adar. Misha Nichnas Adar. Misha Nichnas Adar Marvi Besimcha. And you can hear how similar it is to la 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 la. Misha 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 Nichnas Adar. And my other favorite connection is Moshe Oisher, who's a well-known Hazzan and performer of Yiddish music, Yiddish stage, movies, the whole bit, back in the 20s and 30s and 40s as well. He wrote a version of Chad Gadya, and it's basically a total takeoff on the Bub Over Wedding Nigun, which is so it's essentially, he must have heard that growing up from the Bub Over Hasidim, took it, made it into his own thing, adapted it. That's what every great composer does. But it's just amazing how much malleability this particular nigun has from the Bub Over Hasidim. I've been teaching a class on the nigun and the Hasidim, so I've been learning a lot about their traditions. But what I wanted to talk about in the context of the nigun is this idea of sadness and joy. So now, of course, the Bedekin is a very happy moment, but there's this sort of grandeur in the I've always imagined this being the moment when the bride walks down the aisle, that it's like a total change in her life, both her and the groom. But of course, the bride's entrance is the big deal in the wedding. When the bride comes and walks down the aisle, that there's this sort of this sadness when we have transition, is sort of a sadness. And then for it to go to joy so easily. So the sadness and joy here in the melody are tied really closely together, and it sort of is a reminder that the knowledge of suffering, the experience of suffering, can increase our sense of perspective and our sense of gratitude. So that's how we sort of tied this back into gratitude. So we know in our own lives that the more we suffer, the more we're grateful for the blessings that we have. And we sort of have this idea that, suffering creates empathy, right? So you can say to somebody who's getting a divorce, or who, God forbid, has cancer, if you've gone through these things, you can say, I know what it is to go through these things. I've been through them myself. And as somebody who suffered, how meaningful it is for somebody else to say to you, I have been where you've been. I know what it's like. I can relate. You can talk to me. I can understand how you feel, to have that sense of empathy. So this brings us back to a principle called Hakarat HaTov. So, of course, we know that suffering exists. We understand that sometimes in order to appreciate the joy, we have to suffer a little bit. But the question is, how do we approach our lives on a day-to-day basis? And Ben Zoma, one of the famous rabbis of the Talmud, who also sort of comes to us in the teachings of the Haggadah, talks about this idea that when we are being hosted by somebody, we should say, look how much this person has done for us. Look at how much they've put themselves out for me. And not say, look what they didn't do for me. Look how much they could have done for me. And that principle is called hakarat hatov, right? The literally calling out the goodness, right? Recognizing the goodness. And essentially being an optimist, choosing to recognize goodness rather than being cynical and being negative and calling out what's lacking. So it started with the nigun, this idea of sadness and joy being tied closely together. You could even tie it into darkness and light in this season. And then we have hakarat hatov, calling out the good, this principle that helps us to have a better outlook, have a better perspective, a better appreciation on a daily basis, trying to practice calling out the good. And that's really the best word for it, because we never get to a place where we don't have the temptation to be negative. We never get to a place where we don't have the temptation to see what's lacking. We always have to practice seeing what's good. So that'll be our meditation this evening, our silent meditation, and then we'll do another nigun or so. This is our mindfulness practice, to practice calling out the good. So we'll try to pick something that's good in our lives, something that we can be grateful for, something that would maybe we would use the fast nigun for, maybe we would use the Purim nigun for, maybe we would use the chuppah nigun for. Just take a few nice deep breaths in. First, we'll just thank ourselves for being here. Spending the time to be silent and still. Try to keep that good in your mind's eye. I notice for myself that when the good is in my mind's eye, my breath is smooth, calm, relaxed. And when my brain starts to wander, I get a little caught. Remember that mindfulness is the practice of noticing. A few more minutes. Just enjoy the calm, peace. Karata Tov. Noticing the good. Excuse me. So we were talking about Hakarat Hatov. And Hakarat Hatov is the calling out, is the recognition of good. But it's interesting that in the Hasidic tradition, calling out is also a very powerful part of the culture, because the Baal Shem Tov, who created Hasidism in the 18th century, his name was literally Master of the Good Name. That was his title, Baal Shem Tov, the person who could call out on the name of God, to call on God to do miracles. But when we're calling Hakarat HaTov, we're really doing that in much of our tefillah. We're asking God, we're calling on God to do things. When we say, Oseh shalom imromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, we're saying, Maker of peace on high, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, may that entity, may God make peace for us, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, v'al kol Yisrael, and for all of Israel. And so we're calling on God to do tov, right? So hakarat hatov becomes hakarat Hashem, sort of calling on God to do good in the world, and the Baal Shem Tov's case to do miracles in the world, but in our case to do good in the world, right? So we call on God to do all kinds of things. We have El Na Refana La, El Na Refana La, El Na Refana that Moses spoke to God and asking God to sort of reduce or cure Miriam's sentence of leprosy for speaking Lashon Hara against him when she was suffering. This idea, we don't command God, but we do implore, we plead with God to do good things, Abraham does this with God. Moses does this with God. Right, so we have Elijah does this with God. So we have all these traditions of asking God to do tov, of asking God to do good in the world, knowing that we also have to do good in the world as well. But this is part of our sort of understanding of hakarat hatov. And the more tefillot we do, the more tefillot that we say, the more brachot that we say, we sort of train ourselves to call upon God to do good and to call upon ourselves to do good. And we see that in the beginning of the morning brachot, when we say, Blessed are you, O God, Asher Natana Sachvi Binah, that makes or that gives the rooster the intelligence, Lahavchin V'yom U'Vein Laila, to know the difference between day and night, to have the intelligence for the cock to crow and to get us up in the morning. Baruch Atah Hashem Elohim Melech Haolam, Pokeach Ivrim, right? To open. To clothe the naked, to open our eyes to people suffering, Malbish Ramin, to clothe the naked, Zokef Kefufim, to unbend the bowed. So all of these things, they are things that we're calling on God to do constantly. And that's what tefillah really are, right? They're sort of like, not demands, but they're close. They're exhortations of God to help us. So as we conclude tonight's session, I think we'll probably be in person in a few weeks for our last session of December before the winter holidays are upon us. Speaking of, commanding, Shema Yisrael, right? Shema Yisrael really comes Moses to Israel, reminding Israel what the basis of our Jewishness is. But to just continue to practice hakarat hatov, whether it be tefillot, get up in the morning, say the 15 brachot, whether it's saying a bracha over a piece of food, whether it's saying a bracha when you see a miracle, when you see something in nature that's a miracle, whether it's a bracha when somebody is healed, something like that, just hakarat hatov constantly, the gratitude. Shema Yisrael Adonai Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Well, thank you all so much for being here, for tuning in with me. I feel really blessed, Hakarat Hatov, to have all of you joining in this experience every couple of weeks, doing this mindfulness practice, and I continue to think and plan for having a speaker, having a retreat. So there'll be more information on that as the year goes on. I think it's really important for us to continue the practice of doing this and getting our mindset in the practice of doing this of Hakarat Hatov. So important at this time of year as we see, of course, so much suffering in the world. So thank you again for being with me. See you in a couple of weeks.